Jump off the rock and have swimming races up to under where the King's Bridge is in front of us. Once upon a time there was a shed there, and that's the site of the South S Swimming Club. Once again, one of the oldest swimming clubs in Australia. Now you might look off to the right and you see some of these rock faces, and you'll see some infrastructure hanging off it, some bolts and bits of old framing. That was placed there by convicts who were lowered down the rock faces on rope. They were given a star chisel in one hand and a hammer in the other. And they would spend their days punching holes into that very, very hard volcanic rock. They would then follow that up with some bolts and then hang that infrastructure off it. And that, once upon a time, was a wooden flume or a wooden pipework, which actually fed the water to the Ritchie's Mill complex and then fresh water through to the citizens of Launceston. Now, in the 1929 flood event, it washed away the Duck Reach Power Station, which is around about 1.5 kilometres behind us, and also washed away this infrastructure on the right side, and also washed away the Cataract Walk on the left side of us. This spurred the civic fathers of Launceston at the time to plan and develop some extensive flood protections. And even today, that engineering is still going on apace. However, in 2016, we did have another significant event where, for the first time, all of the flood protection systems were brought online. In 2016, we had 15 metres of water flowing over the top of the Trevelyan Dam. And even with those 15 metres of water spilling over the dam, it was still about 3 metres short of the historical flood mark of the 1929 floods, which were actually even higher than that infrastructure that we've seen. In 1929, there were suburbs of Launceston that were completely inundated, as illustrated by some of those photos. And if you get the chance to walk around Invermay or Inveresk, you'll actually see the historical flood levels marked on the telegraph poles. And at one particular place, you will be able to see that it was actually under 8 metres of water. Even with our extensive engineering flood protection in the 2016 flood, there were parts of Invermay and Newstead where houses once again were inundated. Those of you who might appreciate the naval architecture of some of these lovely fishing and recreational vessels that we see through here, undoubtedly some of these vessels are made with Tasmania's indigenous huon pine, which for all intents and purposes is impervious to marine borer and also various other moulds, smuts, fungi, rusts, example, that otherwise decompose timber. Some of these vessels, with their huon pine hulls, will have the original hull structures, the original planking, and their decks and their superstructures may have been rebuilt multiple times across the operations of those vessels. Now, there are some examples of huon pine that have been recovered from swamps, where the original tree will have grown and lived for perhaps upwards of 1,000 years. It will have then reached the end of its life, been fallen over in a swamp, have been covered and then uncovered multiple times, and then perhaps even covered over and then sunk at the bottom of the swamp. And there is one sample that it's estimated that, according to pollen analysis, there's some samples that have been sunk for 200,000 years, then been recovered. They've brought out the sample of huon pine, had a look at it, and it's just as fresh and just as durable as the day that it was first knocked over. We don't actually harvest the huon pine anymore, and the only way to get any samples of huon pine for usage in perhaps marine construction or for feature, for building features, is to actually access some of the salvaged Huon pine. Tasmania has an extensive hydroelectric network, and so we have lots of dams, and in some of those water dams, they've been surveyed and they've found the sites of some of the old Huon pine dams or some of the ancient swamps, and then they've sent surveyors in, they've spotted where Huon pine perhaps would sit, and then they send divers down and they salvage that Huon pine. And that's the only way you're able to actually get commercial quantities of Huon pine these days. Some other examples of Tasmania's indigenous timbers are King-Billy pine. Once again, King-Billy is a very durable timber, and there is essentially no access to King-Billy pine these days unless you find an old vessel that is being scrapped and you salvage it, or once again some of the old buildings may have used King-Billy pine as a feature, as a decorative feature. We also have celery top pine, which has the distinction of not being a rainforest species, but it is a wet sclerophyll species, so it grows in our wet eucalypt forests. Now we are still currently undergoing commercial harvesting operations in the old growth coops, and what they'll do is they'll go in, they'll knock all the trees down, no matter what species they are. They will then find the eucalypt species, they'll take them off for wood chipping, and anything else that's left behind gets pushed up into a windrow and burnt. I was fortunate enough, about 20 years ago when I was building my house, I could actually access a semi-trailer full of celery top pine sticks, they call them, and for less than $20 a tonne, I was able to actually access those products. And just for reference, at $20 a tonne, that was 1/5 of the cost of a cubic metre of firewood at the time.
Ooh.
Okay, so this vessel next to us that's being refurbished, that's the Valerie, and in the same way, that has a Huon pine hull. It's a Victorian vessel, and for any of those who are, you know, fans of Australian naval history or naval architecture, they can actually identify that this was built in the Kaiser shipyards in around about 1930 or 1940. So strangely enough, there are identifiable differences in those hulls of those locally constructed vessels and this vessel here that says this is a mainlander, that's not a Tasmanian vessel. Sorry?
I thought you said it was built in, where was it built?
This was built in Victoria.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the Kaiser shipyards.
Is it going back to Victoria?
It's going back to Victoria.
Oh, we're going to ask for a lift because we live in the next suburbs.
Oh, okay. No, they've been refurbishing that vessel. They normally have a full crew on their painting, and when they see me turn up, they rush out ready to protect their brand new painting.
Looks great.
I normally work in marine construction or aquaculture, so I'm used to just bumping into things, and
So they get a bit worried.
they do get a bit worried. I've given them a few moments of some cheek thrills as I've come up here. But in my work vessels, we never had bow or stern thrusters to do this. We just push the nose up, someone would jump off and tie us on, and would swing round, no worries at all. But this is easy.
They must be going to do tools, right?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah, so they are from Port Arlington. So it is Port Arlington Mussel Tools. I'm assuming they have some aquaculture mussel development in Port Arlington.
Big time. Lots.
Lots, there you go. The word on the street.
Yeah, you've been down to Port Arlington. That was a short trip. I did it for reader.
Bigger drop us, bigger drop us at the Slan's Pier on the way past when he goes home.
Go past that, we just drop
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
Drop us at the boat ramp.
I just get you to watch
Yep.
your arm there. I'm just going to put it around.
Yeah. You might take it out. You might take it out somewhere.
The young part was numb.
No, it's not.
Sick all day.